10 biggest whaling ships from the 18th century. A whale once sank an entire ship, leaving its crew stranded in the ocean for months. And that's not even the craziest whaling story. The 18th century was the golden age of whaling. Countries like Britain, America, and the Netherlands sent out colossal ships to hunt whales for oil, a resource as valuable as gold. Stay till the end, because number 1 will blow your mind. Number 10. Essex, 1799. A whale is the master of the sea, and sometimes it proves it in the most terrifying way possible. You've heard of Moby Dick, but did you know it was inspired by a real shipwreck? The Essex, a sturdy whaling vessel, set sail in 1799 from Nantucket, hunting sperm whales across the Pacific. But one fateful day, the hunter became the hunted. The crew of the Essex faced something straight out of a nightmare. A massive sperm whale 85 feet long turned and rammed the ship. Not once, twice. It struck with such force that the Essex sank into the abyss, leaving its crew stranded in the middle of the ocean. For 3 months, they drifted across the Pacific in tiny boats. With no food or water, they did the unthinkable. They resorted to cannibalism just to survive. When rescuers finally found them, the few survivors were barely alive. The terrifying tale of the Essex became the inspiration for Moby Dick, proving that sometimes reality is stranger than fiction. But what about whalers that did return, loaded with fortune and oil? That's where our next ship comes in. Did you know that sperm whales can break the sound barrier underwater? Their clicks can reach 230 decibels, louder than a jet engine. Number 9. Albion, 1970s. Some ships chased fortune, while others chased legends. The Albion did both. The Albion wasn't just any whaler. It was a titan of the British fleet, stretching over 100 feet long. Unlike many of its competitors, the Albion specialized in long voyages to the South Seas, hunting the largest whales in the world. But this ship had another deadly reputation. It was heavily armed. Whalers weren't just fighting the sea. They had to defend their catch from pirates and rival hunters. The Albion was built to be a floating fortress, with cannons mounted on its decks to ward off anyone daring to steal its prize. One of its most legendary encounters happened in 1797, when the Albion was ambushed by a group of rogue privateers near the Cape of Good Hope. Outnumbered, the whalers fought back with everything they had: harpoons, muskets, and even boiling whale oil. Against all odds, they fought off the attackers, proving that whalers weren't just fishermen, they were warriors. But what happens when the very ocean turns against you? The next ship on our list faced some of the deadliest waters on Earth. Whale oil was so valuable in the 18th century that 1 barrel could buy an entire house. It was used for lamps, soap, and even machine lubrication. Number 8. Aurora, 1780s. Some ships became legend for their battles. Others, like Aurora, made history with their sheer success. New Bedford, known as the whaling capital of the world, and the Aurora was one of its most legendary ships. Measuring nearly 90 feet long, this American whaler wasn't just big, it was a money-making machine. It broke records for whale oil hauls, returning home loaded with thousands of barrels, making its owners filthy rich. But success came at a cost. The Aurora sailed into some of the most dangerous waters in the Atlantic, battling hurricanes, rogue waves, and even shipwrecks. One infamous voyage in 1792 saw the ship barely escape an ice trap near the Arctic. For days, the crew hacked at the frozen sea with axes, desperately trying to break free before they were crushed. And then, there were the whales themselves. During one hunt, a massive right whale over 60 feet long dragged the Aurora's whaleboat for hours, nearly pulling men under with it. Eventually, they succeeded, but the crew learned firsthand that whaling was not for the weak-hearted. But if the Aurora had it tough, the next ship faced even deadlier conditions, where just breathing the air could kill you. Sperm whales can hold their breath for 90 minutes and dive over 7,000 feet deep. That's deeper than the Empire State Building is tall. Number 7. Lydia, 1790s. Arctic whaling wasn't just dangerous, it was a fight for survival. The Lydia was built for that fight. Some ships were made for the open ocean. The Lydia was built for hell on ice. At 95 feet long, the British whaler was one of the toughest ships ever to sail into the Greenland whaling grounds, where temperatures dropped below negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit and storms could tear sails to shreds. What made the Lydia special? Its hull was double reinforced, designed to smash through sea ice rather than be crushed by it. This made it one of the few ships that could hunt bowhead whales, which thrived in the frozen Arctic waters. One legendary trip in 1795 saw the Lydia get trapped in ice for 2 months. The crew had to burn whale oil just to stay warm, and at one point they were forced to eat raw whale meat to survive. By the time they broke free, they were nearly frozen to death, but they refused to turn back. But what happens when the ocean isn't just freezing, but endless? The next ship on our list sailed into uncharted waters, making history in the process. Whalers had superstitions. They believed a woman on board was bad luck, but a cat with extra toes brought good fortune. Number 6. Amelia, 1787. Some whaling ships hunted for oil, others changed history. The Amelia was the first of its kind to enter uncharted waters. Before the Amelia, British whalers stayed close to the Atlantic. But in 1787, this 105-foot-long behemoth became the first British whaling ship to sail into the Pacific Ocean. This wasn't just another voyage, it was an expedition into the unknown, where the maps ended and survival depended on sheer skill and luck. Captain James Shield led the Amelia through treacherous storms, hostile islands, and uncharted seas, pushing the limits of whaling. It was a massive gamble, but the payoff was worth it. The Pacific was full of sperm whales, creatures whose oil was worth a fortune. The ship's first trip alone made its owners rich, opening up the Pacific for British whalers forever. But the Pacific wasn't a friendly place. The crew had to defend themselves from hostile island tribes, and in one instant, a group of native warriors ambushed them on shore, forcing them to fight their way back to the ship. The Amelia survived, but whaling in the Pacific would never be the same. If the Amelia sailed into the unknown, our next ship faced something even deadlier, the wrath of the ocean itself. Sperm whale oil was so prized that it even powered the lamps of the White House for decades. Number 5. Pacific, 1793. Cape Horn, the deadliest waters on Earth. Only the strongest ships could survive it. The Pacific was one of them. The Pacific was a monster of a ship, 98 feet long, built to endure the most dangerous passage in the world. Every whaling ship had to make a choice: take the long way around Africa or risk Cape Horn, where waves reached 100 feet high and ships vanished without a trace. The Pacific was one of the few that dared to take the shortcut. During a voyage in 1796, a rogue wave smashed the Pacific, nearly capsizing it. Crew members were swept overboard, and for a terrifying moment, the ship was completely on its side. But somehow, the Pacific didn't break. The crew cut loose heavy cargo, righted the ship, and continued their hunt like nothing happened. And the whales? They weren't any friendlier. During one hunt, a harpooned sperm whale charged the Pacific at full speed, slamming into its hull so hard that the ship shook like an earthquake. It took the crew 6 hours to finally bring the beast down. But as tough as the Pacific was, it didn't compare to the absolute fortress that came next, a ship built to break through the Arctic itself. Cape Horn is so deadly that an estimated 10,000 sailors have died trying to go around it. Number 4. Royal Bounty, 1780s. Imagine sailing into the Arctic, where the ice can crush your ship in seconds. The Royal Bounty didn't just survive, it thrived. At 110 feet long, the Royal Bounty was one of Scotland's largest and toughest whaling ships, built to endure the deadliest conditions on Earth. Arctic whaling was different. Whalers weren't just fighting whales, they were fighting nature itself. The Royal Bounty was one of the few ships that could handle it. Unlike most whalers, the Royal Bounty was reinforced with iron-plated ribs, making it nearly indestructible against the ice. It could plow through frozen waters, reaching hunting grounds that other ships wouldn't dare approach. This gave it a huge advantage. While smaller ships struggled, the Royal Bounty returned home with record-breaking hauls of whale oil. But no ship was invincible. In 1792, the Royal Bounty was trapped in an ice field for weeks. Temperatures dropped below -50°F and the crew ran out of food. They had no choice but to hunt polar bears and seals just to survive. When the ice finally broke, they limped home, frostbitten but victorious. But while the Bounty fought against ice, the next ship faced something even deadlier: greed, ambition, and betrayal. Whale oil was so valuable that during the height of whaling, it was worth more per gallon than champagne. Number 3. Kingston, 1790s. Not all whalers fought nature. Some fought each other. And the Kingston was at the center of the biggest betrayals in whaling history. The Kingston, measuring over 102 feet, was a London-based whaler that helped build Britain's whaling empire. It was one of the most profitable ships of its time, making its owners millions in today's money. But success breeds rivals, and in the whaling world, competition was cutthroat. In 1797, while returning from a highly successful voyage, the Kingston encountered a mysterious distress signal from another whaling ship near the Falkland Islands. Thinking they were coming to help fellow whalers, the Kingston's crew approached, only to be ambushed. The stranded whalers were actually pirates in disguise, looking to steal their entire cargo of whale oil. A brutal fight broke out on deck. The Kingston's crew, armed with harpoons and muskets, fought off the raiders in one of the bloodiest whaling battles ever recorded. The ship barely escaped, and to this day, historians debate who sent the fake distress call. But if betrayal could sink a whaler, what about the ocean itself? The next ship wasn't just big, it was unstoppable. Some whalers believe that seeing a white whale was a bad omen, and the Kingston reported just seeing one weeks before the ambush. Number 2. Commerce, 1970s. Imagine being at sea for 4 years, never touching land, living off whatever you can catch. the Commerce pushed human endurance to its limits. The Commerce was a 95-foot-long American whaler, but what made it legendary wasn't its size, it was its insanely long voyages. While most whalers spent 1 to 2 years at sea, the Commerce regularly stayed out for 4 years at a time. It was less of a ship and more of a floating city, completely self-sustaining in the open ocean. The ship was so well equipped that it had live animals on board, including chickens, goats, and even pigs to provide fresh meat. But even with careful planning, the crew often ran out of food and water, forcing them to drink rainwater and eat raw fish. But the craziest story of the Commerce came in 1799, when a massive storm snapped its main mast in half in the middle of the Pacific. Without a working sail, they were stranded for weeks, drifting with no control. Instead of panicking, the crew did the impossible. They rebuilt the mast using spare wood and whale bones, stitching together sails from whatever fabric they had. And somehow, against all odds, the Commerce survived. But if the Commerce was the toughest whaler, the #1 spot belongs to a ship so unstoppable, it became the ultimate symbol of whaling's golden age. The longest recording whaling voyage lasted 11 years. The ship the Nile left port in 1858 and didn't return until 1869. Number 1. Perseverance, 1790s. Some ships fought whales, others fought nature, but the Perseverance, it conquered both. At 100 feet long, the Perseverance was one of the largest and most successful whaling ships of the 18th century. Unlike other whalers that specialized in either Arctic or Pacific hunting, the Perseverance sailed everywhere, from frozen waters of Greenland to the warm currents of the South Pacific. But what made this ship legendary was its ability to survive the impossible. In 1795, while hunting near the Arctic, the Perseverance was caught in one of the worst storms in whaling history. Icebergs crashed into the hull, waves over 50 feet high pounded the decks, and the entire crew was ordered to abandon ship. Except, the Perseverance didn't sink. Despite being battered for days, the ship held together, surviving conditions that destroyed at least 5 other ships in the same storm. When the crew returned expecting to salvage whatever was left, they found the Perseverance still floating, barely damaged. It was built to last, and it proved it. The ship wasn't just a whaler, it was a legend. And just like that, the Perseverance became the ultimate symbol of whaling's golden age, determined, resilient, and relentless. If you loved this deep dive into history, you'll love what's next. Click here for more epic stories, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Let's keep exploring the past together. See you in the next one.